Well, what's up there, DevCentral community? It is DevCentral Connects, and I'm John, and this is Jason. It's Thursday at 12:30 Pacific, and we are here to connect with you as we always do. And we are streaming live to YouTube and LinkedIn and Periscope. And a big shout out to you Twitch people out there. We're streaming to you as well. So hey, all you gamers, right? So it's great to always connect. So Jason, how's it going today, man?
It's going fantastic.
We've got a great one today. We're going to talk about some edge stuff. As they say, you'll pay for the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge, right? Or as another wise man once said, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space, right? So it's all about the edge today. It's all about the edge. But hey, before we get into that, I was talking to a guy the other day, and we were talking about Saturday mornings, like growing up, the old Saturday morning cartoons and that kind of thing. And it brought back like these memories of the Saturday morning breakfast that I would have. And it's not like it was this fantastic, sophisticated thing, but it brought to mind like the cereal that I used to eat as a kid. And I was wondering, was there like a cereal or a breakfast food as a kid that was like the go-to, like it was your favorite special moment?
Wow. Well, probably the Sugar Smacks. Now they've rebranded it's Honey Smacks now.
Well, yeah.
Incidentally, if you've watched Stranger Things, there's a time issue where they actually used the Honey Smacks because that's what's available. But it was Sugar Smacks when Stranger Things was around. So it's one of those catches in the shows, like, hey, they got that wrong. But it was the Honey Smacks.
Okay, the Honey Smacks. And that was that like the little frog, if I remember right? Yeah. That who would like smack people, whatever.
It was before the bee, right? Yeah. So
before the
bee now.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of the Saturday morning thing, I guess I'll date myself a little bit, but that was back in the day that there was nothing on at 6 o'clock in the morning when you woke up to watch cartoons. It didn't come on until like 7 or 8 o'clock. So my brother and I are huddled on the couch under a blanket, freezing, like watching the with the colored lines on the TV. It's like it's going to be any minute now.
It's fast. It's must see TV with just the kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. No 24-hour binging on anything back then.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. When you mentioned Honey Smacks or Sugar Smacks, it made me think. I think it was Calvin and Hobbes, the comic, where he would always get the like frosted covered sugar bombs.
Chocolate frosted sugar bombs.
Chocolate frosted sugar bombs. And I was like, someone has got to make that thing. So that's awesome, man. Mine was either the Fruit Loops or the Apple Jacks, which I feel like the Apple Jacks was just like Fruit Loops, but only like one. They just focused on the one flavor. That's right, just the apple. And I'm seeing a couple of people there in the chat.
Yeah. Kevin's all Fruit Loops.
Kevin, Fruit Loops, my man. Yeah, good stuff. And I see the one with Leif Zimmerman. I can still feel the missing skin on the roof of my mouth. I just got to say, Leif, my friend, it was a small price to pay for the goodness of those Fruit Loops, right?
Those don't hurt me. It's the Captain Crunch, and I'll still get it every now and then. I'll see it. It's like, oh, I'm going to get it. My wife's like, I don't know why you do that to yourself.
Yeah.
Because it is like 2 days later, you're like, oh, my gums hurt so bad.
That's awesome. It's like I can't feel my mouth.
Little flakes of glass in that or something.
Little shards of, razor blades or whatever. So good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Absolutely, we did. Twags 10, yes.
T-Wags.
Yes, we had to get up and change the channel manually. Like there was no
it was like click, 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 the knob, the dial. It's crazy stuff, man. Well, good to go. Yeah, so it's just, I don't know, it's kind of fun when me and that guy were talking about like the Saturday morning routine growing up. I was just like, man, there was the, you get up, you have the cereal, you sit down, you have the cartoons. And then, there was like that line of the cartoons. And then after that, it was time to head outside and play till mom called you in for dinner or whatever. Exactly. Right. So times have changed a bit these days. Right. But it was good. All right, man. Well, good to go. So we got some exciting stuff coming up, right, Jason?
We do. Next week, I'm back with You Want Answers. I missed last month because we did a special show with the Shape guys, which was awesome. Yeah, so I'll be back, and then March 18th we got John. You got the security sidebar.
Security.
And then we're doing a Zero Trust show. We're having Brian McHenry back to the show. He was with you. Was that last week?
That was last week.
Last week. So yeah, we're going to have him.
And all that. Yeah.
Stuff. So we'll have him back as well as Corey Marshall. And we're going to talk about Zero Trust, what it is and why it's important, and industry nuances and what have you. So
spoiler alert, you don't trust anything,
Goes Fox Mulder.
Trust.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Trust no one. Love that poster.
Awesome, man.
So that's what's coming up to close out the first quarter of the year in Q2 if you're follow the financials. So that's March. So today we got a great show. We're going to meet Volterra, which is F5's latest acquisition. Mm-hmm. And so we're just going to dive down and see what is this Volterra thing about. Joining us today, we have the Vice President of Product Marketing, the aficionado of 100-gallon water heaters, the sommelier to the best wines he knows, his own, Mark Weiner. And we also have joining us the General Manager, Vice President of Service Provider Solutions, home automation nerd, Pike Peaks Raceway's version of Mario Andretti, and a blast from my startup past, James Feger.
All right.
All right, guys.
Gentlemen,
how's it going?
It's great to see you. James and Mark, man, great to have you guys here today. Thanks for being on DevCentral Connects.
Likewise, thank you. I'm a long time listener, first time caller.
Nice. James from Colorado. How are you doing today? Kind of a thing, right? You're out there in the mountains. Am I right, James?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in the foothills, and we actually got a little snow overnight, so woke up to white in the trees, and it was nice. So, I am ready for spring and summer, though.
Beautiful, beautiful, awesome, man.
And Mark, you're way out west, not quite in the ocean yet, but pretty close, right?
Pretty close. One of those Silicon Valley types. You can see the sunshine in my background. We're a little spoiled.
Hey, you'll take it, man. You'll take it.
Not to rub it in, Seattle guys, but.
So what about you guys? Breakfast cereal, throw it at us.
Golden Grahams.
Golden Grahams.
Frosted Flakes back in my day. Granola now.
Okay.
But I will say, Jason, you've got the theme song from Sugar Smacks in my head because I think the frog's name was Dig'em.
Yeah,
I was just a big fan.
Yeah,
that's right. That's awesome, man.
Yep.
And Mark, I gotta say, on the Frosted Flakes, Tony the Tiger, that creates the greatest milk at the end of the cereal experience you'll ever have. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful thing. It's like, man, I got to drink that sugar milk. So that's beautiful. Beautiful.
And Cocoa Puffs, but not to date ourselves.
All right.
Are you cuckoo for the Cocoa Puffs?
That's right.
Yeah, James, you already got a shout out for the shirt.
Well, you may have discovered my source.
Nice
I thought that was secret.
Yeah.
Anyway,
beautiful.
All right, so we're going to talk about Volterra. Mark, you like come along with the big prize, right? So you're an old legend within the halls of Volterra, right?
We can't even say old. Volterra, we're just a little over 3 years old, but a whole lot of very fast innovation from a great team.
Yeah, and that's crazy. Like 3 years. 3 years ago, it wasn't a thing. So before we get into slides and the discussion, just real quick, what was missing in the industry that created Volterra and caused a rocket success right out of the gate?
You bet. So the founding team, Ankur Singla, along with Harshad as co-founder, they were multiple times now entrepreneurs. They built the whole switching product line at Juniper in the second half of 2000s. They pioneered, along with a couple other vendors, the whole software-defined networking market in the early 2010s, right? They built Contrail within a year. That went into and acquired by Juniper, really built that out. They were in 70% of the world's tier one 4G telcos within 4 years. Amazing. As they were doing that, as Ankur cites, as they were doing that, they saw the challenges in all these providers moving, the software-defined stack into all these different locations, finding it's really hard to manage them all, coordinate them. They're still operating in a more of a perpetual software fashion. They said, how can we bring a cloud operating model, integrate layers in the stack so you can really dynamically move cloud services wherever your workloads are which are only going to accelerate with 5G along with enterprise application modernization, microservices, container, modern apps. They said, we're going to build something where we can put a cloud environment wherever enterprises or providers need to put their apps. And you can manage it as one, see it end to end, secure it, policy control it end to end as a single cloud, but you can go wherever you want, not just up in the public. And that's what they went off, took their Contrail learnings, other stuff, and didn't know what the heck to call it. They brought me in to launch the company back summer of 19, and I had about all 90 days to launch the company. But this concept I came up with, and Gartner the next week actually announced it's one of their top 10 tech trends for 2020, and now for 21, it's number 3. Is this concept of a distributed cloud or distributed cloud service, where you can put, again, a full cloud environment or a subset, layer 4 to 7 stack, or even a subset wherever you need it based on where your workloads are and what you want to do. Maybe it's microservices, maybe it's a full app, whatever you need, wherever you need it, at the edge, across multiple public, in your data center, all the above, or building great managed services like James is going to drive, among others, for us. That's kind of it in a nutshell, if that helps cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so, James, from your perspective, seeing what you experience with your extensive SP background, but coming into the vendor side, what excites you about what Volterra brings to the table?
Good question. So honestly, one of the things that excites me is just the passion that the team brings. I mean, you saw that with Mark, and as we've been able to work through the process of bringing Volterra and F5 together, the excitement and just the intelligence that team has was infectious. When I think back to my time before F5, when I was actually on the carrier side, one of the biggest challenges that we had moving to, I'd say, modern architectures with software and containers and edge computing was we as the customer had to really be the service integrator, and that's not really a thing that telcos really want to become. They were doing it out of necessity. And so when we started researching and understanding what Volterra had, a lot of the challenges that I had in my past life were solved. Being able to have a platform stack and all of the networking and the application security together, and then have it commonly managed, made my life as an architect trying to give our operations team something to run much easier. It was a much easier conversation because the operational lifecycle is one of the biggest challenges that I think edge computing presents, especially as you scale into thousands of locations. Mm-hmm. And so looking at this as, how do you quickly launch services? How do you do it at scale? And how do you do it kind of seamlessly with the same experience across the board? That solution I hadn't seen anywhere before. And so when we found Volterra, and then I started understanding the team behind it, it just, to me, it was one of those things where it's like, this is going to be very powerful, especially for the customer base that I serve here at F5.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Well, Mark, do you want to get into what you're going to share with us?
Yeah, I thought we'll just do a bit of an overview of where we tie into some of F5's foundation on adaptive apps. Take you through the platform quickly here. I know we have a tight bit of time, so I may have you move through a couple and not over PowerPoint, folks. So
not a problem.
And hit me guys with any questions, or if we have questions come up, love to make it interactive in this era of too much Zoom.
Always, yeah. Ask those questions.
You bet. So as just a little bit of a setup, and I won't take you through too much, but as we know, digitally transforming is not easy. It's a great concept, it's a great outcome and a goal to have, but just like James was saying, putting together the tech stack to really change and digitize business processes is not easy. You're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of different tools, just like Ankur saw with his carrier customers in the day at Juniper. You've got a whole bunch of layers. These are typically not integrated well together. They're certainly often not end-to-end. As you take your apps, you modernize them, you put clusters in different clouds, different cloud providers, locations, you microservicize. You don't have integrated tools typically to do it. And by the way, as you do, and you break your app up into multiple pieces, either location, microservices, containers, all the above, you're really increasing your attack surface quite a bit. Certainly as you introduce APIs in volume, we've seen there's very little in the market today for proper API discovery and security. So just modernizing by going to microservices and exposing APIs, you've got, way increasing your attack surface as you try to transform things. And certainly, as you can imagine, your end-to-end visibility has gone down quite a bit as you move your apps over and you have multiple tools and stacks to try to do that. So basically, you got a lot of infrastructure challenge, much as you try to improve your business processes via transformation. Next, thank you. And that complexity obviously impacts operating your apps, whether you're doing them, on premises, whether you're putting them in the public cloud, and man, a lot worse as you move them out to the edge. Particularly, you're going to have different stacks of infrastructure for the edge than you do in your data center. And certainly even your public cloud is going to be way different than what you do at the edge. And what you're doing in Amazon may be different than what you're going to be doing in Azure. You're going to have different tools, different processes. Cloud providers are great for giving you integrated and simplified ops within one cloud. But just like we've seen, even going and transporting from cloud to cloud can be tough as you go from one cloud to 2 or 3, particularly with a given workload or even different workloads. And all that's going to impact the goals of your transformation, your end user process. So as you go out toward the edge, even into multiple clouds, it gets a lot harder to operate, much as there's other benefits that go with it. Next slide, please. And you can build out all the way here. So like we said, you're going to have operational debt. You're going to have challenges. What you're doing in the data center isn't going to apply necessarily what you're doing in the edge. So you're trying to catch up in all these different places, as opposed to what James is saying, try to unify. You'd like to have a consistent model as you move to different places. It's hard enough just to track and manage the user experience, but trying to glue that and make that, if that's not consistent, you're going to fall further and further behind. You're not going to be, it's very difficult to automate that when you have different infra, different stacks in different places. We talked about security landscape already, and your observability is going to get tighter and tighter. What you're doing at the edge is different than what you're doing in the on-prem. Is what you're doing different in Cloud A like Amazon versus Cloud B, GCP. You simply don't have end-to-end viz often you're doing it. So now you got more and more tools. You're trying to do it, track, pull your logs, maybe even do yet a third-party tool. You're not going to have timely problem resolution, not to mention scaling and making your staff more efficient, whether you're a provider or an enterprise.
Well, and you get brittle at that point too, right? Because the more complexity you're inviting into the system, especially when you're doing the same thing in multiple different places, but they all have to be different. Exactly. The same team might not be managing all of that, and so you've got brittleness in your infrastructure and your tech stack, as well as your employee base, and that's challenging.
And your attack surface, mind you, because they have to manage the brittleness.
Yeah,
of course they do.
Well.
Yeah.
So, and I'll go very quickly, build this out for me, please. I should have given you the built out slides, but it only gets harder as you teams are building out and doing this with modern apps. It's hard enough with a single monolithic web app trying to move it in these different environments, but you got modern apps, which you're putting now in these different places. These modern apps are going to be, they're going to be microservice based, container based. Goodness, over time, you're going to go serverless, maybe Lambda. But the challenge, even as you're chopping these apps up into microservices, making them modern, putting them in different clusters in different places, relying on APIs, not just transport and network layer and IP address layer, to have them communicate with each other, that complexity is only going to get harder. Managing your APIs, finding them, properly connecting them, even getting these different clusters with different microservices, jigsaw puzzle pieces, as I call them, in different places. That is only going to magnify the complexity we saw in the prior couple of slides and discussion points.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a complex place out there, Mark.
Yeah, and Mark, you called it jigsaw. Actually, I'm going to start using that because I've always referred to it as Lego blocks, but those are much easier to work with, and I think jigsaw is a much better description of what we're dealing with today.
That's my marketing guy metaphor, but it really works. You have jigsaw puzzle pieces, not one sheet of paper, right? Not an 8.5 by 11. And the jigsaw puzzle pieces aren't held together by IP addresses, they're held together by APIs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that API security is a big deal.
And by the way, we'll talk about that, guys, here in a little bit.
Yeah.
API security, very early in the market, but badly needed. That's lagging in the market. That's one thing, as Volterra, we're bringing into the DevCentral community 2F5 and to the market, is really finally some proper security for APIs, because the API adoption is way ahead of API protection.
Yep.
Isn't it always? The new services always are very far out in front of actually securing them.
Yep.
For all of our listeners, I mean, that's the innovation, the speed in app teams, right? Both dev and DevOps, often way ahead of where security needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
We did a couple of years of industry survey. We just did it last fall. And we asked the question, hey, who owns API security? Who on the team is responsible? Is it DevOps? Is it, something on security ops? Is it CISO team? Like 85% of respondents said, number one, it is DevOps. But number two, we do not have a solution in place today. We're not exactly sure even what we're supposed to do, but it is our responsibility. We actually published that on the Volterra site. So it shows there's a real need in the market for something that's automated, easy to use, and again, is one of the 10 things DevOps has to do in a given day or week.
Yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, we all know attackers are not going to wait on us to get our stuff together, right? They're not going to be, oh, hey, we'll just take a few days off while y'all figure this out.
Right.
So
no.
There's no continuance for that.
No. So moving forward here. So again, the solution we now, Volterra, as part of F5 are going to do is try to address a number, and build them out here, please, a number of these challenges. And I'll show you the platform here in just 30 seconds. But some of the benefits, you can go back one, just the benefits that we have customers have seen, certainly James will see with a lot of his providers. And Volterra already had coming in 3 of the world's 15 largest service providers. SoftBank is number 5. They're on our homepage, with some of their comments. But some of the top telcos, key things they and the enterprise are looking for. Number one, and these are complementary, not necessarily competing, but how do we reduce cost of operations? How do we consolidate some of that discrete stack, that siloed stacks, both within one location, but across on-prem, Cloud 1, Cloud 2, and Edge? How do you consolidate those consistently across locations, but even in a given stack, given multiple tools? Consolidate it. That reduces cost of operations, and it also makes you much faster as you go to market and makes you consistent. So your day 0 is easier to deploy. Your day 1 takes less time out of your day to operate. So how do you get it out faster, get it right, and make it easier to operate with less tech debt? That is a key thing. Again, having a consolidated stack operated 100% as SaaS, like the diagram says. Improve that attacks, cover your attack surface better, improve security, because you have common policy across these different places and up and down in your stack, even as you modernize your apps.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark.
Pardon?
I was going to just chime in here. I think one of the linkages that I believe is really important to the community is with DevOps, even to a degree NetOps. One of the, some of the feedback we get when we talk to customers is of course they want security. Of course they love security, but oftentimes it's the friction makes it more difficult. And that's why you see these, hey, we're way ahead of security. I think between security and observability, by having it as part of the deployment chain, as we have with Volterra, you actually eliminate that friction point. And I think that's one of the key things that I was personally really excited about, because again, in my former life, I had responsibility for the security group, or parts of the security group and architecture. And it was always, hey, we want to do the right thing, but we're also going to end up not being able to serve our customer if we don't get these products launched. And I think we put our teams in really difficult decision points. And so I think this is actually a great solve to a lot of those friction points.
Great, thank you here. Next slide, thank you. Great. So what the Volterra platform does, pardon any background noise, the joys of working in a home office.
we no problems.
This is all real, guys. This isn't staged.
I've got a tile saw running on the other side of the wall from me.
Okay. So I mentioned distributing cloud services, but that term really describes what we do well. And go ahead, please, and build out here. I usually have these as pre-built out slides. But what this solution, what Volterra brings in, lets you do is really put a full set or a subset of cloud services wherever you need them. We packaged it, you can see on the top. Volt Mesh is really an integrated layer 3 to 7 stack, from routing, load balancing, an API gateway, this cutting edge API security, web app firewall, a whole range of network and security, one data plane fully integrated. You can use all of it, you can use part of it. but it's going to simplify that operation where you want to put an integrated networking stack as opposed to 3, 4, 5 tools. Volt Stack is actually a set of app and platform services. So you get a full Kubernetes environment, you get key management, secrets management, identity management, all these things you need to do to actually run workloads. So you add the two together, you've got a full cloud environment that you can distribute. No, you're not going to put that full stack probably in AWS or GCP, no. Out at the edge, you want to put a cloud at the edge and make it really simple and centrally operated, it's a great way to do it. Whether it's the edge of our network where we've got POPs or points of presence around the world, whether it might be over time at your enterprise edge. Again, great. Or, hey, I want to connect cloud like we see here. I want to connect Amazon to Azure. Hey, I want a consistent set of networking and security tools to do it. Great way to go cloud to cloud. We can connect you with the wide area network across the internet, connect you so you're completely seamless. You can see everything, secure everything end to end. Hey, I want to go higher up and connect clusters. I've got a modern app with jigsaw puzzle pieces, and I got 1 through 9 in Amazon. Maybe I've got 10 through 19 in GCP. Or maybe I just have them in different locations, and I need to connect them. Again, a fully integrated stack, app networking, load balancing, app firewall, et cetera. I can connect all those really seamlessly wherever I am around the world. All done via SaaS, drop it in, simply configured. You get all the observability, put in your policy, off it runs. You're not configuring 4, 5, 6 tools, 6 UIs. And by the way, how the heck are you going to troubleshoot that? Multi-cloud public cloud hybrid to data center or private cloud. Or another use case we have, hey, I want to run some workloads closer to my user. I want to do jigsaw puzzle piece, whatever, 20 through 29, 1/3 of it closer to my users. I can actually run it on Volterra's global network in these 20 plus POPs, points of presence located globally. So I can improve my user experience and I'll process the rest of the app on the back end. Again, another option because we're distributing cloud services wherever you need to put your workloads, whether they're fraction or full workload. And you can even put it out there on the enterprise or physical edge itself if and as you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really exciting to see a service like this. James and I worked for a startup together 20 plus years ago. And when Volterra was acquired, we were joking on Teams. It's like, this looks exactly, from a layer 3 perspective anyway, exactly like the service that we were going to roll out to allow, B2B and B2B or B2C services. But it definitely wasn't software as a service. And you definitely weren't getting deployed in a day, and you definitely weren't going to have the ease of service and integration. So, to see kind of an idea we had on our company 20 years ago come to fruition and then some is pretty exciting.
Excellent. The beauty is, again, with SaaS, just as all of our customers, you're trying to digitize, you're trying to leverage the benefits of a cloud environment. Why isn't your infrastructure also cloud native and operating the same way as what you want to deliver as the app and the business logic? We're cloudizing the infra to enable you to get to that cloud operational model, not just for your end user, but for you as DevOps, you as dev team as you're doing it, or NetOps or INO elsewhere as you're running it. That is the objective that Encore saw and then that we have been able to build. Next slide, I'll show you just a little more detail and then we can take any questions. Feel free to hit the build. It's nice. You can see the logos on bottom. It's nice in our short couple of years going, year and a half going to market. We've got this recognition from, honestly, the top analysts. And in the case of That's Interrupt Tokyo, that's the #1 show in Japan. It's great to see this recognition with our product being in the market literally, a short period of time. And these aren't easy folks to get by. So we mentioned it's SaaS. Here are what really, I won't go into every bullet by any means, what are some of the capabilities in Volt Mesh and in Volt Stack. So you can see the list there, full range in Volt Mesh of app security, key components. You get an API gateway. Actually, again, cutting edge API security. I'll just call that out. We can discover APIs, whether you inherit them from a prior dev team member, whether you find them from an open source microservice code, whether you built them yourself. Discovers everything you didn't know existed, blacklists everything, looks at the app logic and what policy you have, automatically whitelists only what's needed, everything else is left off. All that done via machine learning. You don't, as DevOps, have to take time. You do not have to go do it. All that done, all automatically, then baselines and monitors. So if there's ever strange behavior, again, we can find anomalies, take it offline. all that automatic. That's pretty much no one in the industry, public or private, does that today. So that's very good for that gap we saw from our survey respondents and from you out there. So range of that service, you can do service mesh, load balancing, secure layer 3 routing, a whole range along with that backbone I showed you in the diagram. And I'll show you that real quick. VoltStack, like I mentioned, a whole range of platform services. Basically, Kubernetes is a service with all the supporting pieces you need. You want to run this at the edge of our network, you want to put it out at your edge. A great way to go and do that. And Volt Console is simply, that's our operating console to run all this. You get the end-to-end viz, great logging, great visibility, business, real detailed analytics, customized dashboards, 100% API focused, so easy integration all the way around. Standard Kubernetes commands. Again, fully open, fully API based, and it's multi-tenant. Not just great for James and his service provider customers, but also for any of you large enterprises where you want to give self-service. Your DevOps, you want to let NetOps go do something. You want to let your developers go do something. You can tee it up, roles-based control, do multi-tenancy. Folks can do it themselves, and you can get the development agility you want, not wait weeks for or days for someone else to have to go provision something for you.
Yeah.
That's basically the products. We'll go, I know we're at time here, go hop on, show you the, so this is a network we built out. Sorry, go back one for me. This is a key asset as well for, all of you listening and maybe using this over time. This is a 10 terabit plus global private backbone with 21 points of presence in it. So you can privately connect. You can go from Cloud 1 to Cloud 2, Amazon to Azure if you need. Direct Connect, Express Route are great. You go from your data center up to the cloud. But hey, you want to go from Cloud A to Cloud B. There's not necessarily a high motivation among providers to make that easy for you. Great private network to easily go do that with Volt Mesh and the backbone. Hey, you want to go connect to your users and use these points of presence to stream. Again, full private network to connect all those points where you want to host. Distribute your cloud services wherever you need to, privately connect them, all integrated with Volt Console, same UI to manage everything. So great way to go. Great, do that. And we peer with 200 plus other peering points. So lots of connectivity. Peer right to the SaaS providers also. So you can get to your SaaS-based workloads. Great asset for you. Not mandatory, fully optional, but another resource as you look to distribute your cloud services and workloads.
Yeah, 10 terabytes is quite a bit more than our 10 gigabytes back in the day, isn't it, James?
Just
1 in 400 gig physical pipes, 1 in 400 gig fiber pipes we have.
Wow. Yeah,
All
that's
private,
crazy.
not in the cloud. These are all our private hosted links and our private hosted locations. This is carrier grade.
That's awesome. Well, I know we're up at the top of the hour, and James and Mark, you guys have places to be. Any parting thoughts before we move on to our next guest?
James, please.
No, I just again for all of the people tuned in here, I think I highly recommend you go and check it out. You can actually poke around a little bit on your own on the Volterra website. And then if you have any questions, obviously you know how to reach out to here at F5. So thank you very much.
Awesome,
Great,
guys.
James. Thank you. Well put. Volterra.io. Feel free to take a look. And if you want to go deeper, under resources, there's a whole set of technical documents. And our solution pages, there's many short demos and videos. So you can absorb a lot of this quick, or you can go very deep in our tech docs. So anything, that's great. And we would love to, James's team, our team, we'd love to help you guys out.
Awesome. Well,
Amazing.
thanks, guys. And I'm sure we'll have more discussions about the amazing things Volterra brings to the table in the future. So, we may have you guys back again if you are up for it.
I'm in.
Awesome.
Cheerios, guys.
All right.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much, guys.
Appreciate
Really
it, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Take
Bye.
care.
All right. Well, thanks, James,
fantastic.
Mark, for a fantastic overview and discussion.
Yeah. Wow.
Now we're going to zoom in a little bit for a demo from a fun guy who grew up on a mushroom farm in Pennsylvania. Please welcome the one, the only friend of the show, Eric Chen.
There he is, Mr. Eric Chen. Welcome, man. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. It's fantastic to be back here again.
Fantastic, man. So you grew up on a mushroom farm in Pennsylvania. So it only makes sense that you're like one of the top experts here at F5 in
That's right.
In 2021.
I have a question about that. Actually, I've seen on
Okay.
how it's made and all that, at least on this particular mushroom, it's like they're all kind of they look like barns, and there's just container after container that they seed with the mushroom spores, and then they put them in thing. How was it at your farm? How did they do it?
Yeah, it's a fascinating process. I mean, if you think about, nobody ever really thinks about like where do mushrooms come from, but it is kind of as you described it. It's more of an industrial process to an extent where it's all done indoors. There's a lot of science behind it. My father, he actually kind of studied food science at the University of Illinois, and then he kind of decided that he wanted to kind of get into mushroom farming. And what was really cool about it was that he kind of started with this kind of perspective of, hey, like I know science and I want to apply it to this industry and kind of trying to improve it. And he really kind of like, that's kind of like what he made him excel. And I think it's funny because I also kind of, you kind of heard Mark talking about Encore and kind of how they kind of revolutionize this new platform. And I think that there's a lot of similarities with kind of thinking about, there's kind of cloud computing and kind of how it's been done before, and how can we revolutionize how cloud networking is. So I'm really excited to kind of share with the DevCentral community kind of like what I've learned in just kind of this few past weeks of just kind of like what Volterra is, and just try to demystify what are all those slides, what are these kind of quote unquote jigsaw pieces that Mark was alluding to earlier.
Yeah. Well, you want to get into it?
We're excited.
Sure, let's do it. So I kind of wanted, as I said, you've seen me on the show before, and you've seen me talk about F5 Big IP. So you must be wondering, like, well, what is Eric talking to you to me about this whole Volterra thing? And what I've been doing at F5 over the last couple of years is helping our customers deploy our Big IP platform into the public cloud environments and kind of being able to bring it together. And just kind of what I've seen is this is kind of a huge problem. There's this sprawl of networking and this requirement that you have to be not only a network expert, but now you have to become a cloud specialist. So you have to become an expert at AWS networking, an expert at Azure networking, an expert at Google networking. It just goes on, and it's just kind of this kind of pace that just cannot keep up. And what was really compelling, and kind of why I'm talking to you about Volterra, is just how they kind of remove that requirement to kind of understand that particular cloud's networking and just kind of focus on what you're trying to do, which is just deliver an application, make it available, make sure that it's secure, and not have to become this kind of specialist in all things cloud. So that's really kind of what I want to share with the audience today. And with that, what I'm going to be doing is it's a bit of a contrived examples, but if you're like myself, you can kind of imagine the scenario, which is you're in your on-prem data center, and maybe your data center is just a server under your desk, or maybe it's kind of a large physical data center, and you just say, hey, I want to take a part of my application and migrate it to the cloud. But wait, there's a problem with the scenario, which is you just realize that this application, it has to connect home. And now you're just thinking, oh, this is a networking nightmare. How am I going to stitch together all these networks? I mean, how many people who are watching this now are a fan of IPsec tunnels, right? You just kind of wake up and you say, hey, I'm just going to go build an IPsec tunnel, right? That's the best breakfast cereal, right? Just kind of stir that in there. No, right? So what I'm going to be showing is just kind of like how there's this magic that just says like, hey, Volterra does the thinking for you. Volterra kind of understands what these different environments are, and it kind of brings all of this together for us. So this is kind of what you'll be seeing in a demo. I thought it would be helpful to just kind of bring this to light with just some basic slides. And what we're going to be seeing is just kind of like a use case of we're just going to start with a client application that lives in a data center. And we're going to say there's this front end application, maybe this is your Nginx tier that's talking to kind of your Java or Python, backend or maybe like an Oracle database or something, some secret sauce that just doesn't move easily. And the goal of this is we just want to say like, hey, let's just move this out there. And this is kind of the end state that we want to get to, where we're going to have still our kind of on-prem environment. So you're still going to see that back-end application there, but we're going to take that workload and we're going to move it out to this AWS region. But we're going to do it in a way that instead of having to do kind of the old school IPsec tunnels or just kind of other messiness, we're going to say we're going to leverage this kind of SaaS platform to kind of deploy into this environment. And before I go to this, something that I should probably help the viewers and something that's helped me is to just kind of understand that, you know, I called it magic, but this is really just kind of basic, right? Is we're talking about something that many of our Big IP viewers know already, which is the power of a proxy. And what I'm talking about is what I'll be talking about is something, and what we've heard from Mark is something that's called Volt Mesh. And what Volt Mesh is at the end of the day is it is a machine. It could be running on bare metal hardware in your data center. It could be a virtual machine, or in some cases, it could even be a container, but I won't focus on that today. But you know, the brilliance of it is much like the Big IP can run in different platforms, Volt Mesh can also run in many platforms. And the beauty of that is that it can also run in a cloud environment. But one of the big differences, and this is what was really excited, is that you don't have to be an expert on how to deploy into AWS. So take, for example, this environment where I want to kind of connect into there. I'm just going to do a brief demo of the console right now. Is that here is just kind of where we're going to start within this Volterra console. And right now, there's kind of different personas that we can kind of interact with this, because Volt console is really meant to kind of cater to different use cases. So you might have an application owner that needs to kind of control the services that they're doing. But if you're, you know, the network person, the person who's kind of responsible for spinning out the environment, you're going to be working in the system namespace. And if you're kind of more an app person, some of this might seem familiar in naming conventions. We talk about namespaces. A lot of this is kind of influenced about ideas from Kubernetes. But from this perspective, what we can do is we can start to kind of build these kind of jigsaw pieces of how we're going to connect our services, how we're going to connect our applications, how we're going to solve this basic problem of how do I have my application still function after I move it into the cloud. And for, you know, if you are responsible for kind of making this connection, you may not know all the intricate details of how do I build an AWS network, how do I connect it in. What Volterra does for you is you can just say here and say, you know, hey, I have an AWS site where I need to connect into. And you can say, you know, maybe I want to build a net new network within that environment. Maybe I have an existing network that I need to connect into. You just fill in this information, hit save, and it will build that virtual machine out in the cloud environment. And the net result of it is, you know, again, this is kind of what happens, is it's going to be deploying this Volt Mesh node into that environment. So now, if you think about that diagram that I was showing earlier, this is kind of what we've done. We've got that Volt Mesh node that we've deployed in our on-prem. We've got the Volt Mesh node that we've deployed out in the cloud. And we have the building blocks of how we can try to bring together this application. So what we're going to see in this demonstration is that we're going to stitch this together, but instead of having to kind of, you know, rely on manually dealing with Ike and keys and secrets to kind of stitch together a network, we're just going to say, you know, that once we've deployed those nodes, it's taken care of all the communication. So those nodes just need to have external connectivity. But what they're doing is, you know, Mark talked about this global network that Volterra owns. So there are regional edges that exist geographically around the area, and each of these nodes is communicating with that. So through that global network, as we're traversing from the network, we're going to be able to leverage that. So in the first case, we can kind of expose the service publicly, and we can have this live on Volterra's network. So this is what they refer to as a regional edge. But then this regional edge can communicate securely with this VoltMesh node that lives in the AWS environment. And that's kind of, your typical proxied use case. But what's really powerful is this problem of this front end application still needs to talk securely to the service that lives in my on-prem data center. And in this case, we can now expose a private service. We could also potentially layer on additional security, and then establish a secure communication path for the private communication. So this is just really powerful in terms of taking this kind of age-old problem of how do I get my application to work, and kind of what you'll see is do it in a very easy to do manner.
Yeah, just to interrupt you really quick, I can think of 1,000 examples back in my network engineering days where we just wanted to be able to have applications between our two data centers talk, and the crazy BGP and OSPF calisthenics and yoga we had to do that complicated our network design and outage windows and all of that, trying to figure that stuff out. Design work took longer, troubleshooting took longer, and just to be able to overlay a system like that is, makes, 15 years ago me very happy.
But you're still happy today too, right? Just to be clear. Just to be clear.
Because he's still eating his Fruit Loops, right?
That's right. Every now and then, yeah.
Yeah. So as what you'll see in this demo, and I promise I will complete this on schedule, is that I'm going to make use of this kind of silly demo app. And, Mark earlier talked about modern apps, but this demo app, I like to think that all apps start as crappy apps, right? So maybe you have an app at home, and this is kind of my demo app, where it's really meant to just kind of show you from a networking perspective what's going on. So to all the app developers out there, I apologize. This is meant for more illustrative purposes. If you are into more of microservices and using hipster app, we also have some very nice demos that can kind of showcase some of the more advanced capabilities. But for our audience today, I just really want to kind of hone in just so you can kind of help you understand. Because for me, this was kind of a mystery of you talk about this VoltMesh on these slides, but just show me how it actually works. So to help illustrate how it works, this is just going to kind of illustrate the points that we go along. So the first is that as we're connecting to this app, it'll clearly identify where is this running. Is this running in our AWS environment, or is this running out in the quote-unquote on-prem environment, which will be called UDF within this. We get some networking information. So we're going to see, what is that kind of service that's in there. And really, I just want to do this to kind of prove where it is. And more importantly, we're going to see what the source of that connection is. And really what I want to just do is just kind of demystify how this is working. And the spoiler alert is that if you've worked with BIG-IP, you kind of understand the powerful nature of a reverse proxy, or if you've worked with Nginx. And that's really kind of the glue that's going to do this. I could do a whole separate network where I can show you how I could do this in a routed mode, but for today, I'm kind of focusing on kind of a method that we can use with Volterra for doing this in a non-routed mode where we're securing the communication through a proxy. All right, so with that, let's dive into our demo. So I'll start with, this is kind of, you saw the Volterra console before. But what we're looking at is just a picture to just kind of illustrate these 2 points. So in this particular environment, we've got the on-prem is kind of hanging out on the East Coast, and our cloud environment is hanging out on the West Coast. And really what we're going to do is we're going to cover those slides that we had in before, is how do we stitch together these two sites, and how do we stitch it together without having to know BGP or OSPF or IPsec. We just say there's these 2 points there, and we want to be able to connect it. Oh, and I should have highlighted it earlier too, is that if you think about the building blocks of an application, if you have a front-end application and you have a back-end application, how does that front-end application know how to talk to that back-end application? most application developers probably wouldn't use an IP address that's not super friendly for an application developer. You'll probably have a DNS name, and maybe it'll be an internal name. So what I'm doing at this step is I'm creating an internal DNS name that will be advertised by the VoltMesh node that's in my AWS environment. And why is that necessary? Because when I migrated my application from on-prem into the cloud, I don't want to have to rewrite that application. I want to be able to say, you know, in the on-prem, it was using this internal DNS name, and all I really want to change is where it's pointing to. So that's really what that step about is, with the domain is saying that, you know, this is where you should look to. This particular service is running on 8443. And now we get into the next super powerful part of Volterra, is that Volterra is meant for not just managing one site, but it's meant for managing potentially hundreds of sites. So in this particular example, what I'm saying is that I know that this particular service is running just in my home site. But let's say that you are dealing with a situation where you might have, like, you know, hundreds of stores or hundreds of branches. You can kind of create what's a virtual site, and that will kind of automatically kind of propagate this service to those sites. So it's a very powerful concept in kind of thinking about how do you start to organize your network. So if you're coming from an application developer perspective, I almost think of this like doing like a SQL query on your network, or perhaps like if you worked with Kubernetes using an app selector, right? It's this idea of, you know, how do we kind of use labels and metadata to be able to kind of construct our network instead of worrying about network ranges. But I'm also using an IP address for this as well. I could have also used service discovery. So it's also, you know, I could have put in a DNS name. And what's also interesting about this is because we have the VoltMesh node in each of the sites, it could use the local DNS to kind of identify where that backend service is. Or perhaps you have something like console with service discovery, or maybe we can extract that from a Kubernetes cluster that's running in there. So it's a very dynamic way of discovering, you know, the big IP equivalent of where are my pool members, right? That's the problem that we're trying to solve at the end of the day. We're going to throw in a health check because it's always good to know that things are healthy. And what's cool about this too is because we have each of these nodes running in each of the sites, when we're doing that health check, it's going to come from that VoltMesh node that's adjacent to where that service is. So we are always making sure that, you know, within that site, within that network, that the service is healthy within there. And this is going to be it. So in this case, this is a private service. We don't want this riding out there on the public internet. So again, in this particular example, I'm targeting a particular site. But this could be a way, you know, if you want to work with your security team, you might say, you know, this set of developers needs to access this resource in a particular set of environments. So you can kind of start to kind of construct, you know, what does your network look like? And that creates the back-end communication. And just to kind of go back to the slides for a minute, what we just set up is kind of the first building block of this, where we need to be able to connect from this point front end right here to the back end right there. So that's kind of what we just kind of saw there. So the next part is going to be doing the public portion of this application. We want this application to be available globally. One of the super cool things, and before I get to the global part of it, is you'll see that I just checked that little box for manage DNS records. In this case, I've delegated a DNS zone, so kind of the public record for this particular domain, to Volterra. And the reason that I've done that is I don't want to have my teams to have to think about, you know, I have to go into an IPAM system to register the DNS. So what's happening at this case is, as I'm creating this resource, Volterra is going to take care of propagating this to public DNS. So in the previous example, we were talking about private DNS that's being served out by that Volterra gateway. But in this case, we're talking about global DNS. We'll go through similar steps that we went to for the TCP load balancer, where we're going to kind of set up the origin pool, you know, make sure that it's in the correct site. The variation here is we're targeting now the on-prem or the UDF site that we have from our demonstration environment. So we're kind of showing that there's flexibility that essentially wherever that Volterra Volt Mesh node is running, we can both advertise and also it can either be like the destination, like the pools of what you're trying to pull from, or it could also be the VIP, right? So it's a very flexible way of, do you want to advertise a service there, or do you want to use a service from there? And it's all proxy based in this particular example that I'm doing. So I don't know, Jason or John, if you have any questions as I'm going along, or if anything out from the chat.
We did have one question or just a comment from Marcus on, sounds and feels a lot like Cloudflare and Magic Transit.
Well, there's differences in just that from this perspective, we're also not just covering kind of the public portion of it, but also the ability to kind of create these private endpoints as well.
Right.
So like this particular side is probably very comparable to kind of your kind of run-of-the-mill CDN, but the former portion of it and what's really powerful is that it's not just about kind of covering that kind of edge part of the public facing side, but it's also able to deal with that messiness of, you talked about that earlier. There's that back-end application
right.
That's probably not suitable to kind of just stand up on the internet. This gives you a secure way to kind of expose it through this. So this is now just kind of we're connecting in, and I just want to kind of highlight on this kind of what the building blocks are that we have, which is that we've successfully connected to AWS, and we've done this through Volterra's regional edge. So there was an Anycast address that was resolved. It was able to connect through, and we brought it in. And then you can also see that the connection was coming from within that AWS environment. So we didn't have to kind of like actually expose a public IP address within AWS. All the communication is initiated going out from AWS. It's not like the service was coming in there. And this kind of highlights the way the traffic was coming in is that as we're coming in off of that Anycast network, we're going to move through kind of Volterra's global network and then reach the service that's within there. And then what was previously flashed by earlier was just kind of showing how when we were connecting through to the backend application, again, this private communication, this is the one that you don't want exposed on the internet. Again, we're making use of that proxy so that we can kind of securely communicate from AWS to the on-prem without having to kind of publicly expose that kind of back-end service. I'll just kind of let this run through because I know we're also kind of coming up on the top, and it's just going to kind of run through other aspects of it. But hopefully this is kind of the learning process that I went through to kind of understand Volterra, that this is kind of helping other people kind of imagine how Volterra could kind of help them with their own problems. There's a lot of information that Volterra kind of gains from being having those nodes in there, and you can kind of see here that we can kind of centrally aggregate all of that information and present it to this. So whether it's the application team, the security team, or the networking team, they're all going to be able to kind of share this information through this kind of centralized console. Get stats, look for problems. It doesn't become this like chase of, where's the problem, looking in logs in different systems. We've kind of brought all of that information into this kind of single view so that, whether it's a network problem or an application problem, you can kind of, quickly resolve where the issue is and get a fix in short order.
So just a quick question from me.
Yep.
In your demo, you go through and you build it manually, but I noticed there were tabs on there where you could look at the JSON, and I'm assuming that you can then take that and you can automate that whole thing rather than going through the steps manually in the Volt console.
Yes. So again, for me, it's always useful to just kind of start with a UI just so you can kind of understand where the pieces are. But, to your point, I also come from an application programmer background. So Volterra does have a very well documented API. So every single action that I was doing through the UI could be done through the API. And if you want to kind of leverage more of an infrastructure tool, they also have a Terraform provider so that, if you do find that there's a lot of repetitive tasks, or if you're trying to incorporate it into the lifecycle of your application deployment, and then they also have a Terraform provider that can be leveraged for that. So, Jason and John, hopefully I've kind of demystified a little bit, kind of what is this kind of Volterra thing, and kind of seen just kind of, one baby example of how it can be used to kind of deal with kind of just some of the pain points that we have of, how do we get this application securely exposed? How do we secure the communication internally? There's just a lot of possibilities of how you can use Volterra, within your environment.
Yeah, I think that was perfect because, it's like today's show is Meet Volterra, right? It's like, your first day of class, you're meeting your teacher and you're kind of getting a feel for what's this going to be about. And, as we dig into more use cases and integrations with F5 products and Nginx and Shape and how all that is going to play out over time, we'll definitely have more integration stories and solutions to share down the road. And so, I think it was great.
Yeah, agree. I mean, you start here, you start kind of exactly what you said. You kind of baby step into this, and this was a beautiful introduction. So I think that, the mysticism around it has been lifted a bit,
I mean, Daniel's called it, right? Very enlightening. Awesome. So,
what else can you say? I mean, really.
You're now seeing the man behind the curtain, right? You're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But that's awesome. It's enlightening to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool, man. It's always a pleasure, man. You do a great job, and we really appreciate it, Eric.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me on.
All right.
Awesome, man.
Thanks, Eric.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
All right, man.
All
Well,
right.
fantastic, man. I'll tell you what. So we got to meet Volterra. We got to hear, kind of about what they do, who they are, and then just that demo right there that Eric kind of dropped on us to put all the pieces together. Super cool.
Yeah. I moved around a lot early in my career because, you would stay somewhere for a little while, you'd learn everything there was to learn, and then you'd move on. And, I've been at F5 now 12 years, and, whether it's acquisition or it's, our own product development, there's never a shortage of things to learn around here.
Oh, my goodness.
So I'm excited about the journey. I've been on here for 12 plus years, and I'm excited about the future with, Shape and Nginx and now Volterra, and definitely never a shortage of things to dig into.
Never, ever. It's it's an exciting time.
Yep.
Well, good stuff, man. Well, hey, this has been another great show, DevCentral Connects. We really appreciate all of you out there connecting with us today, checking out this Volterra goodness, and man, it's just been a pleasure. So Jason, next week you're gonna answer some questions. We have questions. We want answers, Jason.
Yeah.
And you're gonna give them to us, right?
If there's anything in the forums that you don't have an answer for, or there was an answer and you just want like a deep dive on, drop me a comment either on this video or send me an email. It's j.rom@f5.com. And I'll include it in the show. I always like to dig into solutions. In fact, a couple guys ask questions all the time in a Slack channel, and I'm like, I have no idea, and I've never even thought about that. Let me dig in. So those kinds of things are always exciting to learn because it helps me learn. And so we'll dig into some stuff next week.
Like you said, man, never a dull moment, and always something to learn. So, hey, thanks again to everybody for being the greatest community there is out there, the DevCentral community. Thanks for connecting with us, and we will see you next time on DevCentral Connects.
Take care, everyone.